Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Frankly Speaking on Fridays podcast. I'm your host, Frank Pador. It is October 14th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Oh boy, what a week. I hope that you all appreciated and enjoyed last... Sorry, something happened with my throat there. I hope you all enjoyed last week's podcast with special guest Queen Shelbeast, also known as Shelby, with a nearly 2-hour podcast talking about Miyazaki games. We may be coming back to doing like lore-specific podcasts later, and I'm all for that because I don't think we just graced upon the lore of every single game, but we really didn't dive deep into it, and there's a lot that goes into those games. So we may do that and break it down game by game, or we'll talk about that later. Anyway, welcome to this podcast. It is episode 47, if I'm not mistaken. How are you? How's this week been treating you? Because I can tell you how it's been treating me. But first things first, what's going on? What's been troubling you? What have you been... You know what? Let's not even talk about what's been troubling you. What have you done which is great? Think about it. Think about what you have accomplished. I don't care about the struggles. I don't care about, the woes, potential mistakes which you've made earlier this week. They happen. That's fine. Let's focus on the positive. 1, you made it another week. We are together again another week in order to be able to converse with each other. Thing number 2, what have you done? Did you accomplish any of your goals? If so, even slightly, even bearing the slightest improvement, that is great. You should be proud of that. I think the things that we take for granted are those small little things that we do to better ourselves. And it's difficult to change yourself. It's always difficult to strive and aim and succeed in improvement. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication and focus and energy. But even if you make yourself better just a little bit every single day, just a little bit, it doesn't have to be an epiphany of any sort, just a little bit, that's an accomplishment. And you should be proud of those little steps because at least you're not going backwards and at least you're not staying still. There is always forward motion and progression, and that is good. So no matter what that is that you've done this past week, think about it, draw it in, and applaud yourself. I'll applaud you. Good job. Good job. And that's not intending to sound sarcastic. I truly mean that because it is difficult to improve. That's kind of building onto the main topic of this week. But keep on with those improvements for next week. And I hope to hear from you as far as your improvements go, as well as suggestions of things to talk about, articles of interest. Just say hello. You can email me at fsofpodcast@gmail.com for all of those inquiries. And let's get into the podcast. And... as always, my mind's kind of going everywhere right now. So I'm just trying to better organize my thoughts. And obviously, I'm talking those out loud because that's what a podcast essentially is. But first, let's commemorate this podcast. Episode 47, I believe. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But 47 to the FSOF podcast. Here's to you, my dear listener. Here's to me, asshole in a room with a microphone. And here is to the podcast itself. It's not my normal cheap rum that I have. It's not Taka. This is Dark Eyes, and So before we get into the main topic, there are a couple of things that I want to share about which are of interest. Thing number 1 is that today, over in London, I forget where, a couple of young protesters by the age of 19 and 20, I believe it were, threw canned tomato soup on the displayed Van Gogh painting, The Sunflowers. The painting was not at all damaged, thank God. They had some sort of just, thin glass to protect it. So the painting wasn't harmed at all. I think maybe the border of the painting was a little bit. But they have obviously been arrested and they were protesting oil. and the cost of gasoline over there in London, saying how because of the prices of gasoline, some Londoners and just individuals in general aren't even able to afford a can of soup. While I do not condone their actions at all, if anything, I think their efforts in trying to get their message out was very much misguided. Their dedication is certainly noted, but don't destroy paintings. What did paintings ever do to you? What did Van Gogh do to you? I think someone tried to do the exact same thing with like cake or something to the Mona Lisa. Just don't do it. Just don't. Okay? Find other ways to protest. Take to the street, use a megaphone. Do so in front of a gas station. I don't know. Something more on point, on topic. Leave world fine, famous artwork out of it. It has no relevance to it. Also, don't destroy history. My God, what is wrong with you? If you're going to protest something, stay on point. Because otherwise you're just going to piss off the entire world for you destroying something potentially which has no relevance to your argument and to what you're protesting. So, fie on them. The other thing that we need to bring up before we get to the main point is a figure that we all probably know has passed away today, and that is Scottish actor Robbie Coltrane. Robbie Coltrane is best known for his role as Hagrid in the Harry Potter movie series. And he's also known for other things. The next thing that I would be able to bring forth as part of a role that I recognize him for is he played one of Daphne Moon's brothers in the Frasier sitcom series. So he's going to be missed. And just to commemorate his memory a little bit, these are some tweets that have gone out from very notable individuals. The first one is from Stephen Fry, who says, I first met Robbie Coltrane almost exactly 40 years ago. I was in awe, terror, and love struck all at the same time. Such depth, power, and talent, funny enough to cause helpless hiccups and honking as we made our first TV show, El Fresco. Farewell, old fellow. You'll be so dreadfully missed. J.K. Rowling writes, I'll never know anyone remotely like Robbie again. He was an incredible talent, a complete one-off, and I was beyond fortunate to know him, work with him, and laugh my head off with him. I send my love and deepest condolences to his family, above all, his children. And the last one that I'll say, no, I know Daniel Radcliffe wrote something which was incredibly heartwarming. But yeah, just condolences to that family, to the Harry Potter world, to acting, both Scottish and British. He is a very well-established actor across the pond. So condolences and best regards to his family and himself, and just great appreciation towards the work that he has done. So thank you, Robbie. So, with all that said, brief update in other news. But there is something that I do want to talk about. And this may be a short podcast, I'm not sure. But within my own personal life, I'm 30. As you all know, I'm not afraid to share that. I will be 31 in 3.5 months now, actually. And within my time on this world, there is something that I have been extremely poor at. And it's not just me who is poor at it. I think the majority of people are poor at this. And I think one of the reasons why we are is because we're self-absorbed, I suppose. There are certain things that we should do better that we say that we will, but we don't actually do so because we're in the heat of a moment. You ignore certain things. And in the heat of the moment, basically logic just goes out the window. It's all poignant attacks. It's all just insult. It's all just emotion which comes out, which isn't always bad, but at the same time, we need to do better about it. And what I'm talking about is, let me just read this real quick. Within all of our lives, people are getting married, right? That's what people do. People get married. And the majority of the time we see these marriages break up. And I saw this article which led me to reflect upon my own relationships and, more importantly, how I deal with relationships when things are at a disagreement. So, with that said, let me introduce this with an article, which will then segue into what I feel we all need to work better on. This came out September 23rd, so last month, 2022, by Tara Parker Pope. And it is a post, an article in the Washington Post, which says and is entitled, "Normal Marital Hatred is Real. Here's what to do about it." And they write, do you know that normal marital hatred, what normal marital hatred is? If you've been married or in a long-term relationship, then you probably do. Quote, "I've been talking about this around the country for decades," said Terrence Real, a best-selling author and family therapist who offers couples workshops. Not one person has ever come backstage and said, "What do you mean by that? Everyone knows what it is." End quote. Even so, the idea that hating your romantic partner is normal may come as a bit of a shock to those who have idealized romantic relationships. One conversation with Real, and you will be cured of any notion that real life looks like a rom-com. Quote, "No one acknowledges the underbelly of relationships," said Real, author of Us, Getting Past You and Me to Build a More Loving Relationship. "Nobody acknowledges the darkness," end quote. Relationship experts have tried for years to unlock the mystery of how couples resolve conflict and learn to stay together. John Gottman, a University of Washington marriage researcher, pioneered the study of relationships by recording couples during conflicts and monitoring positive and negative words, facial expressions, and body language. He calculated that strong relationships have a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interaction. Another researcher, retired University of Virginia professor E. Mavis Hetherington, studied 1,400 heterosexual couples over 3 decades and found a type of marriage most prone to divorce. She called it the pursuer-distancer marriage, in which one person typically presses to solve problems, but the other dismisses the concerns. Real said he thinks the real problem is that many couples turn conflict into a power struggle and nobody wins. Quote, "In normal circumstances, if you're unhappy with me, that is not the time for me to talk to you about how unhappy I am with you," end quote, he said. Quote, "Everybody gets that wrong," end quote. So here's what you should know about normal marital hatred and what you can do about it. It's okay. It's okay to hate your partner. There are going to be moments when you look at your partner, and at that moment, there is a part of you that just hates their guts, Real said. You're trapped with this horrible human being. How did you wind up here? What I want to say is, welcome to marriage, welcome to long-term relationships. But don't despair, he said. The question is, now what? How do I deal with it? Stop idealizing relationships. Real notes that we wrongly celebrate an idealized version of commitment, like that cute couple we see at the party who seem to have a perfect relationship. Just once at a cocktail party, I wish someone would say, "There's Harry and Shirley. For the first 20 years, they fought like cats and dogs. He actually left her for a year and took up another woman. Then they managed to work on it and settle down, and now they're pretty okay. Aren't they adorable?" Someone quoted that, probably real, that whole last paragraph. Anyway, normal marriages or long-term partnerships are not happy all the time. After 4 decades of counseling couples, Real has seen that all relationships follow a consistent cycle. Harmony and closeness, harmony and closeness, disruption, and repair and return to closeness. Quote, this pattern of closeness, disruption, and returning to closeness can play out at the micro level 20 times in the course of one dinner conversation. It can also play out over the macro level over decades, he said. Your relationship is an ecosystem. Real said traditional therapy, which can teach us to assert ourselves, set the record straight, set boundaries, and push back, can actually add to the dysfunction of marriages. He knows people don't always like to hear it, but it's healthier to start thinking of your relationship as an ecosystem where any disruption hurts you just as much or worse than it affects your partner. Quote, stop thinking like two individuals and start thinking ecologically, he said. Your relationship is your biosphere. You're not above it, you're in it. You breathe it, end quote. Once you realize that it's in your self-interest to help your partner feel better, it's easier to de-escalate conflict. Save the constructive conversation for later when you're both open to listening instead of in the middle of a fight. Quote, this is not the time to say, let me tell you about all my issues with you. Everybody gets that wrong, Real said. Put objective reality aside. Enter into your partner's subjective experience with compassion and curiosity. Say, I'm sorry you feel that. Is there anything I can say or do that would help you feel better? End quote. Real said it can be a tough pill to swallow, especially when you think your partner is in the wrong, but helping your partner get to an emotionally better place is the best way to protect the ecosystem. Real caution that this advice is helpful for managing the normal arguments and disruptions that occur in every relationship. It does not apply to abusive situations or relationships in which there is a power imbalance, major psychiatric disorder, addictive, or another issue that may require putting your own safety first and seeking professional help. Learn how to repair. Real said successful couples learn how to talk to each other during and after conflict. Instead of saying, don't talk to me like that, Real suggests something closer to, I want to hear what you have to say, so could you speak it to me differently so I can hear it? Quote, I want both partners to be fully voiced, but you have to do it skillfully, he said. People have to learn to speak up for themselves and be loving at the same time. Nobody knows how to do that. Discover real intimacy. Real said we all long for a perfect relationship, but real intimacy actually happens when we learn to accept the imperfections of our partner. Quote, that's the character of couplehood, he said. You're clear about your partner's imperfections and you feel the pain and frustration of it, but you choose to love them anyway. That's mature love. And that's the article. Why did I share that? The reason why I share that is because of that second half, arguing. I think the majority of relationships and marriages and even friendships fail. Any and all interaction, really, when you have a conflict with someone, it can be a family member, a friend, significant other, fiance, wife, I think we are such prideful and selfish creatures that we do not know how to do this. We always want to be in the right. We always want to feel empowered. And when it comes to compensation, when it comes to openly and fully and truly listening to the other person's side of the story, it is always neglected. That step to listen to them truly and understand and try to empathize and sympathize with what they have to say is always neglected. And the reason why I bring all this to light is because I'm like anyone else. I do not know how to argue. I am very stubborn. And I'm pretty sure the majority of my relationships failed just because of my inability to be able to sympathize, empathize, either during the moment or even after the moment. I am horrible at de-escalating because I just get this sense of this sense of pride, I suppose. I get this sense of I'm being attacked by them confronting me or bringing this topic up. So I need to defend myself. I need to cover up just my inner me. I don't like this. It's a defense mechanism, and it's slightly justified, but at the same time, it's not healthy. It's not good. It hasn't been helping me at all, considering that, I've been single for a while now, which is fine. That's mostly by choice. But my relationships could have been much more fruitful, more rewarding, and longer lasting, even more serious if I took the time to put my ego aside and to listen to my partner without judgment and with the want, I suppose is the word, to better myself through their perspective. That doesn't mean that I need to bow down and do anything and everything that they say, like, oh man, I'm really just such a horrible person. I need to do better at this. Let me just do everything that you say in order to appease you. That's not what they're saying. It's just within this circumstance, this moment, this or that. Work on these couple of details. That's it. So let's talk about arguing and how to better argue, how to be more effective at arguing in a way which isn't deterring away from you, isn't deterring away from whomever you're arguing with, doesn't demean them. It's just a discussion and a conversation at that point. So, it's only 2 articles left, I promise. This one comes from psychcentral.com. This was released January 8th, 2017, and still has quite a bit of merit. Medically reviewed by Scientific Advisory Board by Madison Ferry. The title is How to Argue Effectively. Hey, it's almost as if I read ahead. Which I kind of did, but, don't worry about it. I'm also sorry about the sniffing and the sneezing. Allergies have really got me today. So, how to effectively argue, or how to argue effectively. We have all bottled up many small problems and caused one explosive argument sometime in our lives. What we don't realize is that the person on the other side of that explosion might not even have a chance to understand the real reason we are mad. Arguments are completely normal and necessary activity. For them to be effective, we need to understand some key components. To help you improve on expressing your problems, here are some tips. What you're doing wrong in arguments. Placing blame. Please. Third time's a charm. People do not like to be attacked. So rather than saying, you were late and you made me wait, say, I was hoping you were okay. I got worried when you didn't show up at this specified time. This feels less like an attack and you still got the chance to bring up what bothered you. Interrupting. Let the other person finish their point before replying. If you are constantly listening just to respond, the argument will go around in circles. But if you are truly listening to what they have to say, you may gain insight on why it happened. Plus, you will want them to listen when it's your turn. Picking out small issues. If there is a problem that is affecting your daily life and you want to talk about it, bring it up. The saying, pick your battles, is not far off. Not everything can be the way you would like it to be. So if it is a small issue that doesn't happen often or you can live with, let it go. This will make your big issues seem more reasonable. Bringing up the past. Don't work through something and then bring it up again every time you have an argument. It will make the other person feel like their changes do not make a difference. Make sure each problem is resolved before you leave an argument. Then you won't be included to bring it up again later. Yelling. Raising your voice may make you feel better, but it does not reinforce the point that you are trying to make. If anything, it makes that other person shut down, and they may not hear your point at all. Use a normal, talking voice and avoid name-calling. This is the most respectful and effective way to explain your thoughts. Assuming or evaluating. If someone acts a certain way and you assume the meaning, you may guess wrong. Ask them what they meant by their statement before you react. When they do tell you, think of it from their point of view before taking it personally. Then address the issue after you have taken a minute to think about it. What can you do to be better at arguing? Take your time. There's no reason to just blurt out thoughts. Take a few breaths and think before you say your next statement in an argument. Only use facts. Only use the exact facts to prove your point and then let them come to the conclusion. You will water down your statement, adding in your feelings or your perspective of the situation. Don't generalize. Saying you always or you never can be really frustrating to somebody that is being accused. Maybe they have done it once or twice, but chances are it is never every single time. That is called an absolute statement. Do not use those. No name calling. There is nothing worse than being compared to someone that is despised by others. Most likely you will regret saying this, and the other person will be badly hurt. Treat others how you want to be treated. Golden rule. This was a lesson from kindergarten, and it is still important. Don't raise your voice at someone and then expect them not to reciprocate. The key to a good argument is to respect all individuals involved. Practice keeping yourself calm and explain your thoughts rather than blurting. If you need help explaining your thoughts, Allison Holt would love to assist. Visit www.allisonholtmd.com to make an appointment. So, very on point, poignant tips of how to just better do so. Now, of course, these are short little things, but all of them make perfect sense. The problem is putting them to practice and keeping them in mind in the heat of the moment. Because it's easy to push someone else's button, especially when you know them so well. You know how to push their buttons in order for them to react in a way for you to be able to then react the exact same way, if not worse. And then nothing gets solved, and then exactly as the article said, names, words, volume, all goes out of proportion, and nothing is left behind but pain and misunderstanding. So the last article about arguing. This one may take a little bit. I think I won't read all of them. I will read the points, the bulletin points, but I will not read every single one just because there's 31 of them. So, this article comes from perfect24hours.com and is entitled How to Argue Effectively and Productively, 31 Rules of Argument. In this article, you'll learn how to argue effectively and productively. Despite our efforts to avoid them, we all get into arguments now and then. An argument with a significant other, coworker, friend, or even just a stranger online can be stressful and repressive. It is therefore in our best interest to know how to handle these situations, to know the tips and tricks for diffusing and negotiating your way through an argument. So much of the pain, stress, and confusion could be taken out of our lives if we simply learned to have better discussions. The first and most critical step is to stop arguing and start discussing. After that, remember to be as clear as possible and practice kindness and understanding. Give others the benefit of a doubt. Be willing to forgive and compromise. You may not like having arguments, but you should still aim to get better at them. Much improvement in your discourse will only come with time and practice. Yet remembering these 31 things can make real progress in your relationships and disagreements with others. How to argue effectively and productively. That was gross. I'm so sorry, but that needed to come in. Anyway, number 1, stop arguing, start having discussions. Let's see. Come to the table, so to speak, ready to have an honest, civil discussion with others. Try to get beyond the idea of winning or losing an argument. Start seeing your conversational partner as just that, a partner. You are partners on a search for truth together, not adversaries. That is the very, I literally halved that paragraph. Be prepared to change your mind. You won't learn anything if you think that having an argument be defeated is losing or something you should be ashamed about. Number 3, define your terms. Start out by saying, when I say this, I mean precise definition. It might seem like a pain to have to do this, but it will save you a lot of time in the long run by not arguing with someone over definitions. Number 4, really listen. If you don't listen to them, you risk misunderstanding them, creating unnecessary confusion. Furthermore, you can convince someone of an alternate viewpoint if you don't actually understand. How can you, rather, convince someone of an alternate viewpoint if you don't actually understand the view they hold? Active listening will make you better at persuasion, reduce confusion, and is just courteous to boot. Number 5, re-express or rephrase their position. Take a moment to really digest their argument and then repeat it back to them as you understand it. This helps make sure both sides of the argument are on the same page. We've all had times where we've had to say, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I mean is... Instead, make sure you really understand the point they are making before pressing on. Number 6, understand them. Get into their head. If you want to convince them, you will need to understand them. Try to understand their beliefs, values, and thought process. Ask yourself, what would convince you if you were them? Understand yourself. Ask what your goal is. If your partner never helps by doing chores around the house, then your goal is to convince them that they should help. When you recognize the lack of help with chores causes you frustration, you can then communicate that frustration to your partner. Number 8, pick your battles. Your words, let's see. If you try to argue about every last little perceived slight or injustice, it will be seen as commonplace for you voice dissent. If you try to argue about every last little perceived slight or injustice, it will be seen as commonplace for you voice dissent. Okay. Your words will then have less impact when you do raise an important issue, and beyond that, nobody likes someone who is constantly negative. Constantly fighting will stress you out too, naturally. Stay calm during the discussion. Do you like being yelled at? No, hardly anyone does. So, that's Don't insult. That's self-explanatory. Make it personal. Excuse me? You shouldn't get personal by insulting someone, but you can get personal through personal and anecdotes. Telling a personal story to your partner with evocative images and phrases can open them up to persuasion. Crafting a narrative that appeals to their sense of empathy or compassion can be a very effective tactic. Take note, though, that a personal narrative shouldn't be your only argument. A personal story can paint a picture of the situation, but you'll need to back it up with actual evidence and sound reasoning. Speak for yourself by using I. Yes, I think that is a very commonly known thing of, say, your I phrases. So, number 13, deal with the actual argument. In terms of logical fallacies, this is known as a straw man. Straw man. It refers to twisting a person's argument into a version that is easier to defeat, but was not what that person actually said. Doing this is not only dishonest, but it guaranteed to provoke anger and a dismissive attitude from the other side of the argument. Don't build straw men. Deal with their actual argument. Number 14, give the benefit of the doubt, something which was said in the previous article. Ask questions. Asking questions can be extremely effective in advancing the dialogue. Instead of telling people what you think or trying to tell them how to think, you can instead ask them to engage in self-reflection and let them work it out if there are any problems with their point of view. 16, acknowledge how they feel. A simple acknowledgement of your partner's feelings can go a long way in getting them to open up or de-escalating an argument. Period. I don't need to go further with that one. 17, be willing to compromise. Self-explanatory. I think we're good there. Number 18, do your research. If you want to convince someone, you will need to have well-reasoned positions backed by good evidence. You also need to anticipate their responses and have rebuttals ready for their arguments. This involves researching both sides of your argument, both pros and cons for your personal theory or point of view. The more you know about the topic, the better off you are. 19, recognize when you've hit a wall. If you both have presented your best arguments and now seem to be covering the same ground in a loop, it is time to end the discussion. Upon reaching this point, de-escalating if necessary and then politely closing the argument will allow both of you to go about your day and save both of you time. 20, don't build weapon stockpiles. Whipping out problem after problem can seem aggressive, and bringing up too many issues into the argument will only create confusion. It will also increase the probability of getting sidetracked with irrelevant topics. Deal with one issue at a time to make progress, usually the most pressing and relevant issue. 21, stay on topic. Avoid derailing, which is basically what 20 was, so more or less. 22, use good, vivid examples. You'll have an easier time convincing someone to take your view if you can paint a picture in their mind. If you're trying to convince someone not to go to a restaurant, remind them about the time they food poisoning in detail. Remind them about the time they food poisoning in detail. Had food poisoning. Vague and undefined examples don't help, make them vivid. Use metaphors. Number 23, shift the analog. Say if you're talking to a mechanic, you might describe how computer parts interact through comparison to an engine. Analogies. Shift the analogy. Use metaphors, shift the analogy. Analogies are also important to note as they imply equivalence between two things, even though the two concepts may not be equivalent. Avoid absolutes. I already talked about that. Absolute terms. Don't do that. Point 25. Ask them what it would take to change their mind. Ask them what kind of evidence or what argument would be convincing will encourage them to reflect on their own position, will give you insight into their thought process, and reveal if they are closed to outside opinions. If they respond that nothing will make them change their mind. They're closed off, and you should end the conversation. Pushing past this point is just wasting your time. 26. Get them to articulate their own reasons. If you can encourage the thoughts to come from within the other person and not simply from you telling them what to think, you can stand to be more successful in your attempt at persuasion. For example, you might try asking, "Do you see any problem with that position?" Or you can try asking them to help you understand why they adopt the position they have, given the problem that it possesses. 27. Avoid logical fallacies. When arguing, be sure your logic is sound. For example, don't say that your controversial partner can only choose to support you or be against you. That's a false dichotomy. And implies that your partner cannot choose a third option or be somewhere in the middle. Similarly, as discussed above, a straw man is the type of fallacy which doesn't deal with the real argument. You can look up a list of common logical fallacies and are encouraged to do so, as using these will undermine your credibility of your interlocutor picks up on them. Interlocutor. Interesting. Acknowledge your own bias. We all have our own biases, and when engaged in an argument, it can be difficult to see past them. If it is possible, acknowledge your own biases up front. If you admit your biases, your partner can help you keep track of them and call you out when you are defending something irrationally. Being intellectually honest will encourage the other person to be honest and admit their biases as well. 29. De-escalate. Remind them of what is important. As you approach the end of the argument, try to de-escalate the situation. Calm yourself down and calm the other person by talking in a calm voice and suggesting that you let the issue go for now. Remind them what is important, perhaps how much you care for each other, if it is a romantic partner, or that you need to be able to work with them to work together if it is a coworker. Thank them for being willing to talk to you. Number 30, don't bring it home. If the argument in question was at work with a coworker, some time to decompress and mentally leave the argument at work. To bring lingering frustration home is to bring it into your personal life, to risk displacing your frustration on your housemates or significant other. This is a sure way to make life worse for everyone involved, so leave it at work. And number 31, have a plan to move on. Have a plan to reestablish normalcy at the end of the day. If what is critical is that you be able to work with your coworker, verbally agree that your disagreements won't impact your working relationship. Similarly, if the argument was with your significant other, agree to keep helping around the house. Again, don't hold grudges. Being passive-aggressive or otherwise taking out your frustrations on the other person will just make things worse and lead to more hurt feelings. Be ready to move on. Thank you for reading this article about how to argue effectively and productively. I really hope that you take action to my advice. I wish you good luck, and I hope the content blah, 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 blah. Yes, thank you. So, I think some of these points overlap, I feel. But overall, it is important to being able to better effectively communicate, recognize when you're arguing, when you're getting upset, when you're getting mad, and to just be able to just listen and be willing to understand and come to a compromise. And I lose sight of this all the time. And it's unfortunate. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to find these articles and bring them up, because I need to teach myself how to better argue and how to just de-escalate and just listen better to people and to friends and to significant others. So, I hope you learned something from this. I hope you're able to put it into practice. I'm going to do my best to do so, which is always easier said than done. But I hope that we are all able to just have more well-grounded discussions with whomever we may disagree with or unintentionally hurt. And maybe even bring said topics up to another person if they're doing something which we dislike. So, with that said, that is the podcast. Thank you for listening. Again, send all topics of suggestion, articles of interest. Just say hello. Email me at fsofpodcast@gmail.com. And that's about it. So, thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Keep practicing no matter what it is, so long as it doesn't hurt you or anyone else. Keep practicing. I'm going to practice keeping these points in mind for the future, and I hope to just better discuss with whomever I have a disagreement with next. So, take care, everyone. I will see you next week on the 21st, or talk at you on the 21st. And until then, au revoir.